whakakautia mai nei ki tēnei te aka Mauri. Nau mai hara mai. Hei wāwāhi i te pō ka tuku karakia. Reira, kia hirihiri ai tātou. Tūtawa mai runga, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roto, tūtawa mai waho kia tau ai, te Mauri tū, te Mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. Just some housekeeping before I hand over to Chloe Ferguson-Tibble, who is going to run the show tonight. In an emergency, and if we ask you to evacuate, the entrance you come in, you actually go past that and there's double doors that we open, and you can exit both ways, that way. And we always meet across the road. You may have noticed that we have a stand down here of 150 non-fiction books. That's the Te Takarangi exhibition, which has been brought here to pair with this festival from Otago, from our Māori Research Institute. And I really invite you to have a look at that and become inspired and write another 150 for next year's festival. We have a second exhibition up on our second floor. So our second floor is where we have most of our Māori reference books, and we have a Māori toy exhibition that's been just finished today, really to complement matariki. So if you're looking for things to do over the next couple of days, come down this end to the lift. The middle one is always broken, and then up on 2. You'll notice as you walk past McLeod's booksellers, and I think at the gala dinner we'll ask Rafa to talk about how they became involved and really were the genesis of this festival. But they are selling books from all our brilliant writers, those here and those not. Can I now acknowledge our sponsors? At the top of the list is Creative New Zealand, McLeod's booksellers themselves, One Foundation, which is a Maketu-based pub charity. Our Rotorua Trust, Te Arawhiti, who gave money for matariki, and we've kind of tagged this as a matariki event, and in particular tomorrow night, Dr. Rangi Mata Mua will be speaking at Te Tākinga Marae on matariki. Our Te Tatau o Te Arawa, which is our, our Māori councillors, city councillors. Rotorua Reorua, Ngāti Whakaue Education Endowment Fund. If anyone knows where the Sudima is, from the block with the Sudima is, running past Kentucky Fried Chicken, major landmarks in Rotorua, all those rents go into the Ngāti Whakaue Education Endowment, and they give out to our schools, our universities, around about $1 million a year. And then we have some products made by local artists, garments made by Totaia Rendell, New Zealand Pounamu by Mountain Jade, and a fine art by Kiriama Taipa, which usually sits on the table back there, and all our writers sign it, and I think it will come down to an auction on gala dinner night. Without further ado, I please invite Chloe Ferguson-Tibble to come forward, please.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Nau mai ki tēnei hui. Ngā mihi mahana ki a koe matua rangitihi mō tō karakia. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, I tai mai tēnei pō. And kia ora to everybody online. Hi to all my whānau who are hopefully watching. As an avid reader or omnivore, as Whāinga Huia told us that we must be, I'm basically just a really proud nerd who's happiest when quietly reading or writing. And when I called each of tonight's writers to get a bit of a plan together, I soon realised that I was in really good company. Beki Manuatu told me that the problem with public speaking is that it's not writing. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that uncertainty and celebrate our differences. Go the nerds! Go the tamariki who stay up reading their favourite Maori authors until their eyes go gritty at 2 a.m. Go the tamariki who are up late writing their stories furiously. Go my own tamariki who take their massive chapter books to mokopapa wānanga, and while everyone else is engrossed in beautiful waiata for the person receiving their facial moko, my kids have their ihu firmly stuck in their puka puka. Dr. Diana Kupu, a medical doctor and leader of the Mahiatua movement that's healing Māori communities, teaches whānau Māori that in wānanga all of our voices matter, all stories matter. There's no right or wrong story, there are just stories. And I just want to reiterate that here tonight. Writing is like wānanga, and everyone's story matters. We make meaning from these stories, and they become threads of the larger writing wānanga. Ngā mihi nui kupu, for bringing together an array of Māori writers with different voices. What matters most is that we are holding the pen, using our voices, healing our history, and writing our own stories. So if you haven't yet whānau, and you want to, then please pick up your pen, write your stories. Ngā iwi Māori depend on them. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers who have done lots of writing and who have all written at least one fiction novel. First up is Beki Manuatu. Nō Ngaitahu Ngāti Mamoi, Waitaha a Beki. Beki was born in Nelson and raised in Waimangaroa, and she lived in Germany and Italy before returning to the West Coast with her whānau. Her first novel, O Where, won the 2020 Jan Medlicott Acorn Prize and the Ngaio Marsh Award for Best Crime Novel. It has been in the NZ bestseller lists ever since and is now being published worldwide in English and in translation in other countries, including France. Beki is a kind wahine, a deep thinker and a beautiful writer. Homai te paki paki.
Tēnā koe, ihoa, kia ora. Kia ora tātou. Ka nui te mihi ki koutou mō te tautoko. And ka nui te mihi ki a koe mō tō beautiful introduction. Can you hear now? Is that good? Ko waio. Ko Hananui me Takitimu ka Moka, ko faces out in front of me. Ko Waihopai me Kōreti Kawa, ko Te Moana, Arakiwa Te Moana, ko Uruau me Takitimu ka Waka, ko Kaitahu ka te mamo ia Waitaha ka iwi, ko Murihiku te marae. I'm really honoured to be invited to be part of this amazing kaupapa, and I hope it's the start of many more, because what a beautiful thing. All the organisers that have put this together, it's just what we need. So I have, like Chloe said, speaking is not my fave. That's why I write, and I think that's, normal. We all find our ways of expressing ourselves in a way that we know we'll be able to best. And so for me, that is, I think, and feel writing. When Chloe called me a couple of days ago, I was in the airport, and she said that it's going to include a bit of you're actually going to stand up and do a kōrero for a while. And because I was flying, and I don't like flying either. So I had some I had some Valium with me, and I for the flight, not for any other issue. Well, that's neither here or there. But so I had that, and I was like, yeah, oh gee, it's going to be sweet. I'll be all good, sort of. But I kind of made it seem like it was going to be easier than perhaps it will be. Anyway, I've only managed to. I had a bit of a busy few days with whānau for another reason, so I've managed to only sort of do a bullet point list, and hopefully that these little prompts actually prompt my brain to remember why I wrote this bullet point. I think I just want to start. I think there's a lot of what Kupu is doing is honouring our past writers and present writers, and going into schools to ensure that we have future Māori writers. Encourage, not just ensure, but really like, this is a mean thing to be doing. So my bullet point list is kind of about past and present and future a little bit. I started writing when I was little. I just loved books so much. It just the magic that you find in books that is in the world, but we need books to help us sometimes access that magic, or remind us that it is actually there. And being Māori, being a writer, writing and being outside were the things that made me feel magic. And my mum bought me a typewriter so that I could really feel but like a real little geek. And I'd just sit there tapping away, and sometimes I actually would really, because I remember seeing on TV maybe that people who are writers are like furiously typing, and so I would just actually furiously type, but that meant that I was actually just like not writing, but it was just the feeling like this is cool, and that sound, but I actually write really slow. Like I have two fingers, and I think that's because that's the speed of my brain, and that's fine because that's why I'm a writer. I'm actually not saying that all writers are slow like me. That was just actually me. Yeah, I was just talking about my slowness. So from being that little girl who wanted to write and now be invited to speak to people about writing, it's just, a dream come true. So sometimes when I go to talk about fiction and people ask me questions about fiction and my relationship to fiction in the public world is now my book, Owe. And so this is almost a disclaimer in a way that some of the questions that I would answer and the way I would answer them now is not how I would answer them or the knowledge that I had when I started writing it. So it's like you almost feel a little bit like I'm saying this because I don't want anyone to feel like not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes, but like the knowledge I have gained through writing Owe is not what I had when I started writing Owe. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's also the pain of it, because there was a time, which Chloe's heard this story too, There was a time when I first finished writing Owe, I was just so excited about having done that, and there was so much about that book that I was just so proud of, and there was so much that I just, having completed it, just made me feel like on a high that I've can never ever find again, or unless I write and finish another book, which is in the plan, but that's future talk, which I'll get to. But now, where was I? Can anyone prompt me? What did I say? I lost myself. Writing Owe, yeah, and I feel different about where I was then. I was so excited. I was so excited when it was published, and then, okay, so this is where I'm going to. Good, found it. It's there. There was a moment where that joy and excitement kind of split away, and there's like, in some ways I still feel like there's kind of two versions of me as a writer. It's that person who started Owe and the person that I am now, and there was a time of darkness between the two places I am, because I fell into a bit of a yuck place, and then there was this issue in Westport, which is where I live, where all these rats died and they washed up on the beach, which is not at all funny, but it was yuck. It was like, I think it went pretty, it was like news, and real news. People like from other places outside of Westport were actually hearing about the pile of rats, and I was on the plane back from a writers' festival, and I decided that rat wash up on the shore was a sign of the curse that I have brought upon myself. Which is not funny, but also, I mean, rats aren't great, so they were all dead, so I don't know. Anyway, so there was this split. There was this moment where I was like, this is, you know, and we can overthink things and make ourselves believe we're cursed for whatever reason. And then I was like, so how do I get past this feeling? And it's clear and it's obvious is that you go on and you write, you try again and you do something else. And then now I want to also say that Owe, what it's done for my family and for the connections that it's made for us as a family, and for me, the people that it's brought into my life, other writers, other Mauri writers and artists, like, definitely not cursed. I'm definitely like, it's been the greatest gift to have done that and to be still going forward. So I started again, and so with the thought of curses in my mind, I thought maybe I just need to undo everything. So I was like, I'm going to write a science fiction book, which will be a follow-up to Owe, but it will undo everything that happened, and everything that was bad that was happened won't have happened anymore. So I started trying to do that, and then I realised that I was being quite disrespectful to my own work and all the support that I've had from people, that the messages and love and all the aroha that Owe has. I was like, you actually don't need to undo it, and science fiction is actually not probably what you're going to be good at. So I started writing, and within that initial feeling that I'm going to write a time travel book, I started with a swamp. The swamp was going to be the entry point into time travel, partly because of the massive amount of wetlands we've lost in New Zealand through for creating farmland, and so we're about 90% less wetland than we once had. So I wanted to use that as a basis, and now I've taken the time travel out, that swamp is still there, and it's still an important part of the of my new writing. But I was still struggling, so that I think writing a second book has been quite difficult. But then I was at a yoga class. My brother-in-law took me. My brother-in-law's girlfriend took me to a yoga class, and it was yin yoga. And the yin yoga instructor said, yin is more feminine. It has more feminine energy. So it's slower. It's kind of darker, and you're not trying to do anything with your muscles. You're working with fascia and other parts of you. So it doesn't feel as intense. When I was writing Oe, it was an intense and quite speedy. I was quite addicted, and and there was a masculine energy about me while I was writing that book. And then I realised that actually the reason I was struggling it wasn't true I was struggling with the second novel. It was actually that I was writing something that was different from Oe, and that it was now feminine energy to counter the masculine energy of my first book. And then once I clicked with that, then I was like, it's okay that you're going a bit slower, that it's not as intense, and you're not getting these addictive highs from what you're doing. And since then, things have really moved along at still a creeping pace, but I'm comfortable with it, and I know that it's just different, and this is a whole new learning experience. And I think the whole feeling of being split in a way, I'm also a Gemini, so I like to yeah, I think I just always think about the two of the binary thing, and I think maybe that's a point that I actually kind of now want to reach again, even though it was a bit of a yucky feeling for a while. It's kind of what I'm not afraid of happening again, for the sake of creativity and the aroha you find through the people you meet after, the connections, and for the magic. And so I will go perhaps into that place again and feel like moving on again is only going to be exciting again. I hope that I've made sense. I didn't get to write this down beforehand, but I'm going to read a little bit from the new novel rather than Oe. I just chose to do that because this is perhaps my little part of this korero that's about the future. So it's a bit I have shared at another... I have to read from my husband's phone because I've left my phone like on the plane or somewhere. And I've got broken glasses too, but if I stand really still, then they probably won't. Oh, they're managing. So this is a. How long have I been talking? Read my reading? Cool. This is a part. My new novel is mostly about Auntie Cat in Oe. For those of you who haven't read it, there's a woman named Auntie Cat, Kataraina, and she doesn't have much of a voice in Oe. She's living quite an oppressed. She's in an abusive relationship with a Pakimaero farmer, so they live in an isolated area. She ends up taking in her nephew and actually struggling to do that job the way us as aunties like to be aunties, because of that oppression. This is a part in the book before one of her nephews, Tokiri, leaves, and he's leaving his brother Arama at the farm with Auntie Cat. Her nephew was in the spare room packing his bags. Nothing could stop him going, and she didn't have the energy to try. She wanted him to leave loved, though. She'd sneak it into all his pockets, into his belly, smuggle a glad-wrapped plate of it onto the passenger seat of his car. She was sad she had to sneak love to people so Stuart wouldn't see it. A focus on anybody, an interest or commitment or curiosity for what it meant to live, not just survive, triggered him. He respected survival. The craft and leanness of it made him feel safe. Unnecessary things like angel-shaped bars of vanilla-scented soap, faces framed and put on walls, people coming over, people staying too long, people sitting around, people making suggestions or plans or jokes or softening their skin with lotion taunted him. Sometimes her existence taunted him. So pointless. Stuart wrangled any scraps of intrigue or love she showed for any idea or person or place from her, and using a vicious alchemy he boiled them up to an asphyxiant. That night, while her nephew was packing his bag, she was in the kitchen. She fried some secret things, onions and garlic and thyme and smoked paprika and chili. Then she fried chicken thighs and drums until the fatty skin spat itself to a crisp. She put the crisp chicken into a casserole dish and used secret white wine to pull all the secret browned bits from the bottom of the pan. She poured it into the casserole pot with the onions and the chicken and the non-threatening magichasur flavour. Later, she put a spoon into the thick bubbling sauce to taste the love potion. It was good, a packet job, but flash, for her nephew. While she cooked, she had hummed. The boy said he was starving. Far out, Auntie, he said when he came to the table and saw the chicken and beans with butter secretly sliding down them, and the pot of mashed potatoes flecked with black pepper, a plate of white bread and more butter. Stuart sat down beside her. Her nephew sat across from her. The boy hunched over his plate of spiked food and ate with rhythm. No knife in his hand, he used his fork to pull soft meat from the bone, scoop mashed spud over it, and spear a green bean. That fork went to his mouth, and his other hand took his buttered bread, mopped up gravy. As the first hand came down, he took big bites at the gravy-soaked bread. Cat stopped eating, her own knife and fork poised. Steam coming off her dinner, she forgot herself watching her nephew eat. She watched his hands and jaw move and saw happiness or peace or both, because one was the other maybe, she thought, even if having thoughts were dangerous sitting so close to Stuart, who was eating for hunger and hunger only. Triggered maybe by tonight's meat and 3 veg. It was smoky, peppery, spicy, sweet and buttery, thick, rich, unnecessarily delicious, like she was showing off. And for who and for what? She ate a little, then returned her attention to the happiness or peace nestled in her nephew's brow. He was humming, and somewhere in her ribcage she hummed too. She saw her brother and her nephew as he ate his dinner. She saw her father, her mother, her sister, and even herself. She adored the boy so much it reddened her marrow. She wanted to do other secret things with him, roll him a secret joint, watch a pointless movie, cards, kings and assholes, waste of fucking time. Then she felt something in the side of her face, like something dangerously alive, dangerously surviving was watching her. Stuart's knife was hovering over a bone on his plate, and he was studying what it was she found so fascinating. He smirked at the boy, then at her, like he'd caught her out in a lie. She realised what she'd done to the room. It was saturated in the love she had tried to sneak her nephew. You can't hide these things. Even if you try to make it so dry and fine and sprinkle it into the gravy, it seeps out. She attempted to draw it back and lock it up behind her ribs. She scooped at it like she was trying to tidy an ocean away using a teaspoon. Stuart's breathing was ragged. Tokiri was still eating. He pulled the meat from the bone, scooped mashed spud over it, and speared a green bean. She looked down at her food. She needed to spook the love out the room, send it flying like a silent scream from his place of shelter and shelter only, spook it under the doors and through the crack in the window. She sat up and she laboured a frown. She laboured a sort of fucked off breath, and she told a lie to her nephew. She said, "Oi, pick up your knife and eat properly." Her voice was shrill and disgusted. The shrillness was desperation and the disgust was for herself. Tokiri could not know that, though. He had only been vaguely aware of the foamy love dripping like honey from the walls and from the ceiling above his head, and he was only vaguely aware that the honey was being boiled to black astringent crisps, blunt and heavy as butter knives, dangling like icicles above them. Tokiri looked up from his food to his auntie. His brow, which had been happy or peaceful, quivered itself stiff. She could hardly breathe as he looked at her, not quite frowning. He squinted like she had approached him in the street and didn't know her face. She wanted to say, "Nah, jokes, Neff," but any words she sent out could be turned to triangular teeth. He put his bread down at the side of his plate and picked up his knife, and he started to eat properly. The next day he got in his car, the hardness firm in his brow, and drove off with an ease that she was wounded by and appreciated. His leaving was not sad, it was a relief. Best for her, best for him. She called him an idiot under her breath, to scare off any residue might be hovering around her like fire or dragon or blowflies, and she stomped towards the house numb. Kia ora, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Tēnā koe, Beki. It's hard to get up, but you did it. You did it. It was lovely to listen to your reading at the end and be excited about what you're bringing into the world now. And I love how you broke it up into past, present and future, and just acknowledging how difficult that journey's been for you in some ways. I'm personally excited to read about Auntie Cat because I've read Oe. Who's read Oe? There's a lot of us, yeah. And it's, it won heaps of prizes, and you can see why when you read it. So I'm excited to follow Auntie Cat's journey. Ho mai te piki paki anō. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Cassie Heart. Nō kaitahu, ka te mahaki ki makawhio a Cassie Heart. Cassie is a speculative fiction writer. I'm hoping she's going to tell us what that is. Who enjoys delving into human nature in all its beauty and disarray. While fiction is her primary love, and particularly speculative fiction, Cassie also enjoys teaching about writing, self-publishing, writing non-fiction, reviewing the occasional book, and collaborating with others. She's written and published many of her own stories. In 2021, her first traditional novel, Butcherbird, a supernatural suspense set under the watchful gaze of Maunga Taranaki, was published by Huia. In 2022, Butcherbird was a finalist for Best Novel for the Australian Shadow Awards and Best Novel for the Sir Julius Vogel Awards. She's a former Hugo finalist and a winner of several Julius Vogel Awards in a range of categories. She lives with her husband, 3 daughters, and an assortment of animals in beautiful Taranaki. Ho mai te paki.
Kia ora everyone. When you're sitting down there, you don't feel so nervous until you know it's just about your time. Hi, I'm Cassie. I'm from Taranaki. He features in my book Butcherbird, which we'll talk about in a minute. I have been writing, like Beki, for a long, long time, and my origin story of being a writer actually was on my grandparents' farm, which is Butcherbird is set on a fictional version of my grandparents' farm. They lived up the road from me, and we lived right at the foot of Mount Taranaki. So he was a daily part of my life, still is. Much love to Taranaki. My cousins. I had some cousins who lived up the road. There was me and my brother, my uncle who was only 9 years older than me, and then in the holidays, all of my other cousins would get sent to the farm, and we would go to Nana and Granddad's house, and I would assign everyone a character, and I would create a setting, and we would go out on the farm, and we would play games for hours and hours based on the stories that I designed for them, which is, I didn't think much of it until it was my 21st birthday, and all my cousins were there, and they were telling me how formative that was for them as children to come to the farm. What's Cassie going to invent this time? We always had a bunch of different missions. So that's where my love of storytelling happened, was on the farm in Taranaki, and the farm is called Paringa, and I dedicated my book to the farm. So I wrote this when it was published last year. I went through to Papatupu, which is a mentoring program with Huia and the Mauri Literature Trust in 2018. If anyone is a keen writer, I thoroughly encourage you to, next time it comes around, they've just selected the mentees for this year. So in 2 years' time, if you're a writer, get your book into them, because they will help you to hone it and craft it into something wonderful. So I wrote this in 2017 for something called NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, where you try and write 50,000 words in a month. I'm, unlike Beki, quite a fast typer. My nephew, he pretends to be me. I've got lots of videos that my sister sent me of him typing crazily. Look, I'm typing like Auntie, which is really super cute. But yeah, I do type quite fast, so I can do 50,000 words in a month if I really want to. I've been having a little bit of a lull in my writing for a little while before I started writing this book, and I decided I wanted to write something that had lots of things that I loved. And also, I think there was something about that timing that made me want to write something set on our family farm. My nana had moved off the farm a few years ago, but we still owned the farm, and my family had owned the whole side of one road since we'd colonised. My grandmother's side had taken over the whole side of the road and would live there. Someone had lived there ever since, and for some reason I was really missing home. I was living in Paraparumu at the time, and I felt drawn to write a story set on a farm about family tragedies, because I love those, and secrets, because I love those. And also the swamp that was on our farm when we were kids. There was this little bit of it that kind of seemed to float around like it was a little island in the swamp. It's in the book too. No spoilers, it's okay. But I wanted to kind of pull together all the pieces of my childhood that I loved and write a love story, a love letter to the farm in the form of a creepy book. Because that's just how I roll. I love horror. I love everything I write is creepy. I can't help it. Even when I don't think it's creepy, someone will go, "Oh my God, that bit really scared me." And I'm like, "What?" That's just who I am. As a slight aside, speculative fiction is anything that's science fiction, fantasy, horror, or in between. So, ghosts, monsters, aliens, all of those things, time travel, portals to other worlds. And the interesting thing about being Maori and writing speculative fiction is that some of the things aren't actually speculative to me. We often talk about hearing from our ancestors or our passed away relatives giving us messages, and in some cultures that's considered speculative, but it's not really. In Māori culture, it's just a thing that happens, like, oh, yes, I know. So it's an interesting place to be when you're writing speculative fiction. You can kind of go, well, you might think that's just something I'm making up, but actually it's not really. So that's what speculative fiction is, if anyone is curious. I always write speculative because I don't know. I think it was just really strongly influenced by growing up under Mount Taranaki. We had these huge pine trees, and they felt like sentinels who would watch over us our whole lives until Cyclone Bowler. Anyway, when lots of them got knocked down. But there's something kind of magical about living out in the country, and Taranaki's there and the ranges are there, and you're kind of cocooned in this space where there's mist and storms and you don't have power some of the time. And I don't know, it really kind of, yeah, I've always just read and loved fantasy and horror and science fiction, though I write less of that these days. Yeah, so I set about writing this novel for National Novel Writing Month, set on the farm with a family who had suffered a great tragedy and a dying grandmother, and the main character who needs to go home to, she wants to know what happened on the farm. Her family burned to death in a barn fire, and she was sent away, and she doesn't really know what happened. So that is her mission, is to go home and get the answers to that question, and they are surprising to her. I wrote most of it during the November. I went through National Writing Month. I managed to write 50,000 words, and then my grandmother had a stroke, and we had to rush back to Taranaki because we were told she didn't have long to live. So that was really, really hard, because I was writing a book set on her farm. And yeah, so I wrote some of the book sitting by her bed, holding her hand. It helped get me through that really, really difficult time. And then I finished it just before Christmas, I think, because I was just determined to kind of get to the end, because Nana would have wanted me to. She would have said, just get on with it, because that was the kind of woman that she was. Kind of like Beki, I felt a little bit cursed by this book as well, because Nana died while I was writing it, and then just after I'd found out from Huia that they wanted to publish it, my father-in-law died of motor neuron disease. My mother-in-law's over there, she's lovely, and loves books probably more than anyone else I know. So I actually, before I could get into the final edits of this book, I felt like I had to give it a little bit of an exorcism, like no one else can die. So I gathered some bits from like that reflected things in the book, and I set them free, burnt them and set them free on top of the cliffs near my house, or near where we used to live. And I felt like I could get on with the rest of the book, which was good. Yeah, so I'm going to read, how long have I got? We good? Cool. I'm going to read the first chapter of Butcher Bird. And yeah, for Paranga and all the generations of my whānau that lived and breathed and grew on your land, thanks for the memories and the magic. The jangle of her phone, cut through the sound of the shower. Jenna shut off the water and grabbed the towel, scrubbing her face and hands dry before wrapping it loosely around her body and reaching for the phone. Please be work, please be work. Even one shift would help. They were so close to being kicked out of here, and if she didn't get some hours soon, there would be nothing to eat, let alone anything to pay the bills with. Hello, Jenna speaking, she said in her most professional voice. Jenna, that raspy voice, that single word, it told her so much. Uncle David. She mimicked the dry tone. It had been a long time since I'd spoken, and she had no problem with that. She'd been in his house for 7 years, but they'd never really been family. Not like the family she'd had before. Pat wanted me to call your grandmother. Rose has taken ill, and we think it's best you head to the farm and make whatever peace you might need. Jenna didn't say anything, just sank down onto the rim of the grimy bathtub, the cold porcelain lip cutting into her thighs. Her heart thudded in her chest, and a wave of irritation swept over her on realising that she actually cared what happened to Rose. Jenna, I'm here, she said briskly, swallowing the lump in her throat. She's getting on, Jenna. It was going to happen sometime. Lucky the neighbour went to visit, or she might have died. It felt like birds were clawing at the inside of her chest, scrabbling for purchase on a heart Jenna had thought was locked up nice and tight. Jenna? Yeah, I'm here. Give me a minute, would you? It's a lot to take in. Jenna pushed to her feet and walked into the small bedroom. Is she in hospital? She moved to the wardrobe and looked, unseeing, through her clothing. No, she's home with a carer. Been back there a couple of weeks now. What? Jenna straightened. She went to hospital weeks ago, and you're only just calling me about it now. What the hell, David? He drew in a long breath, and Jenna could picture the look on his face. His brow would furrow, his cheeks would flush crimson, like he wanted to blast her but knew better than to start. She didn't want visitors, Jenna. And if she'd been on her deathbed, would you have called me then? She heard him grind his teeth. She wasn't. There's no point going over what-ifs. It's cancer. She's going downhill fast and they want to put her in a hospice. He paused, but he wasn't giving her time to mull that over. He was choosing his words. He always chose his words. She wished he'd just say what he wanted to say, but he almost never did. It's time, he said. We're going to sell the farm, and if you get down there and help out, you can get your cut of the inheritance early. He paused again, his voice softening when he said, we know you could do with some extra cash. Gina choked out a laugh. Of course, she could always do with extra cash. She was a mess, and her aunt and uncle knew it. Probably even Rose knew it. Is this a bribe? No, it's not a bribe, it's an offer. Come on, Gina. We know you had a rough start. We know it didn't always make it easy for you. He sighed. We don't know how long she's got, and this way you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Make peace with the old bat and earn some money. You can't tell me you've got anything better going on right now. Her aunt whispered dramatically in the background, David! And then the phone rattled as she grabbed it off him. He didn't mean it like that, Gina. She sighed. It's fine. I think it's the first real thing he's ever said to me. Why didn't you call me? Gina asked. Why did you make him do it? She could hear Pat breathing through the phone. I'm sorry. I just didn't know how to say it. My mother is dying, Gina. Her voice caught. I might have bolted from that place as soon as I possibly could, but she's still my mother. You have no idea. Don't, Gina warned, her voice tight as she swallowed the loss of her mother again, just like she'd been swallowing it for almost 20 years now. Just don't go there. We all lost a lot that night, Gina. You most of all. I know that, her aunt whispered. Look, just think about it, okay? You don't have to go if you don't want to, but we think you should. Gina licked her lips, her tongue catching on dry skin as she walked into the lounge. I'll think about it. Take care, Gina. Aunt Pat hung up. Gina dropped the phone on the couch before sinking into it herself. It was worn and ratty, the fabric scratching against her legs where the towel didn't cover her skin. She sunk her head into her hands and closed her eyes. Rose was dying. She shouldn't care, she really shouldn't. She'd barely spent any time with a woman since she was 10, and what little time they'd had was spent avoiding the only subject Gina wanted to talk about, the night of the fire, the night everything burned, including her family. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. Who's read Butcher Bird? Yeah, I've read it. It's really spooky. Like, it's seriously spooky, and it's really addictive. And so it's one of those books that you get into, and then you just can't go to sleep because you just need to know what's going to happen. So if you want to read it, it's here. Get yourself a copy. It's awesome. We're going to take a break now for approximately 20 minutes. Have some kai, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hear from Michael, and then we're going to have some pārtai with me and then with all of you. So please don't go away. Give our 2 riders that have been so far another big clap. Matua Rangitehi, could I hand over to you? Kia ora tātou. Kia ora tātou. Can't hear. Kia ora tātou. If we could come in, have a seat, we'll get started. Penny's looking at me like, make your voice louder, Chloe. So I'm saying, if you could come and take a seat, please, whānau, that'd be awesome. Welcome to Bring Your Kai Down, whānau. Hara mai. That was such a mean kai. Hope everybody's feeling a bit refreshed and ready to listen to another kōrero from a lovely Maori writer. So it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Bennett. No Ngāti Pakiao, Ngāti Whakauea Michael. He's a screenwriter, director and author. From 2011, Michael devoted many years of his career to the fight for freedom for Teina Pora. Michael made the documentary, The Confessions of Prisoner T, which led to the discovery of evidence that was pivotal in Teina's exoneration at the Privy Council. Michael wrote the book In Dark Places and co-wrote and directed the dramatic TV feature film In Dark Places, which was nominated for 11 awards in the New Zealand Television Awards and won Best Director and Best Film. Michael was the 2020 recipient of the Te Auponamu Māori Screen Excellence Award, awarded by the NZFC, in recognition of excellence in Māori filmmaking and support for emerging Māori filmmakers. Michael's short films and feature films have screened and won awards internationally. Poor kiriru. Michael has created, written and directed many television series and documentary series. Most recently, he made Te Kohu, an episode of TVNZ's spooky series Beyond the Veil, co-writing and co-directing with daughter Matariki Bennett. Michael's other credits include Vegas, Mataku, Tamariki Ora, Whare Māori, Kai Tangata Twitch, Pura Pura Whitu, Taonga and Outrageous Fortune. Michael's second book, Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas, is a time travel graphic novel with strong social and ecological themes. Co-authored with Ant Sang and published by Penguin. Michael's debut novel, Better the Blood, which I've just read and it's brilliant, even though it's not coming out till August. The first in a series about brilliant but conflicted veteran Māori detective Hannah Westerman will be published in the UK, US, Ahitereiria and Aotearoa in Australia in August 2022, with 11 translations following. Somehow, Michael also teaches screenwriting at South Seas Film School and mentors Mauri and Pacifica filmmakers. Homai te paki paki.
Kia ora koutou, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou. Ngā mihi Chloe for that beautiful introduction. And ngā mihi kōrua. It's just such an honour and a blessing to be on a stage with such extraordinary wahine creators. And so thank you for sharing the stage with me. And ngā mihi to Kupu for this amazing undertaking, and what a great thing, and I hope it just gets bigger and stronger and wonderful. I spent this afternoon, had a wonderful afternoon at Rotorua Boys High School with a bunch of Year 13 students talking a bit about how to write. And so I kind of felt like tonight what I wouldn't mind talking about a little bit is something that I actually never talk about, which is why write. So I hope you don't mind. I need to get a bit closer, Penny is telling me. And just before I jump into that, what I want to start with is to talk about chaos theory. This will ultimately make sense, I hope. Chaos theory, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but the idea of chaos theory is, in a nutshell, a butterfly sitting on a kawakawa bush in Pakimaero flaps its wings, and the air disturbed by the flapping of the wings ricochets off the wall of the dairy and joins another gust of wind and goes down the street and joins another 4 or 5 intakes of wind and goes up into the heavens, and eventually it comes down a day or two later in Seoul, Korea, and lands in the park next to a noodle shop as a tornado. That's chaos theory. The transformations that happen are unpredictable when you're in the middle of it, where the air is going, but on that, if you stand in the park in Seoul, Korea, and look backwards, and there's actually a path that has taken you to this place, even though it looks random. And chaos theory has given me at least as much comfort in my life as any of the religious doctrines that I love and admire so much, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, because it tells me that only retrospectively can you kind of look at the tornado hitting downtown Seoul and make that map backwards. The path is there that takes us to where we are. There is cause and effect. It's not when you're in it that you can understand it, but there's reasons why you're where you end up where you are. And I wanted to talk about a couple of moments in my career that made me think that there is cause and effect in this kind of random kind of billowing forth and back and forth that I've been doing for the last 25 years since I started flapping my writer's wings quite a while ago. The first moment I kind of want to talk about is a night in March 2015. We were at my house in Auckland, and there was a whole bunch of us who had been fighting for Teina Pora's freedom. And it was the night that his verdict was going to come through from the Privy Council. And we were all in front of a screen. Teina was there with his family. Teina wasn't in front of the screen. There was a bunch of us, and we were all waiting for the live stream verdict to come through from the Privy Council in London. Teina was out in the backyard having a beer or 3, and good on him, because 21 years in prison. Years earlier, I had met Teina for the first time, probably 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier, in Pakimaero prison. And I don't know if any of you have been to Pakimaero Unit 6 low security. It is a prison. It is a place of sadness, of men in orange suits in the visiting area, trying to be strong as they hold their children who have come to visit them. And I went to meet Taina for the first time. And by then I'd seen all the videotapes about Taina's, that show the two senior detectives in South Auckland who interrogated him for 5 days without a lawyer present. And I had seen this young Maori boy, 17 years old, desperately trying to get a $20,000 reward so he could support his daughter. And the two senior cops saying, "Come on in, we will help you tell your story." And the result was a completely fictitious confession that ended him up behind bars. I'd seen all of those videotapes, and I knew that this was an innocent man. So I went and visited Taina for the first time to see if he would agree for me to help do what I could do as a storyteller to try and change where he was at. And we were sitting down, and it was the first time we'd met, and we were talking about, I was talking about my family, he was talking about his family. There'd been an All Black test the night before, and we were talking about the rugby. And as we were talking, a ladybird came and landed on the table between us. And this ladybird started to crawl across the table towards Taina. And the ladybird came near his hand, and he raised his hand up, and I thought, okay, well, the ladybird's probably not too long for the world. He's probably about to get squished. Taina kept on talking about the All Black game, and what he did was he didn't squish the ladybird. He very gently put his finger down next to the ladybird. The ladybird crawled up on his finger, and he kept on talking about the rugby game, and he just went, and the ladybird spread its wings and flew out through the barbed wire fence to the freedom that Taina hadn't had for 20 years. And if I hadn't known that this was an innocent man that I was sitting across the table from before, that moment told me everything that I could ever know about this man. He was literally someone who couldn't hurt a bug. So fast forward a few years to this night at our house. So there's a bunch of us who'd fought long and hard for Taina. Taina had been taken away by the lawyers, his lawyers. They'd found out earlier in the day what the result was. None of us were allowed to know until it, legally. And they were really staunch about that. So we were all sitting there, not pretty sure what was going to happen, but not sure. They'd taken Taina away half an hour before the verdict came through from live streamed. And they told Taina, but they told Taina, when you go back to that party, you cannot tell anyone. So Taina came back with his shades on, and his face looked like death. And for all of us, we thought, this is a man who the justice system had conspired now for 2.5 decades to screw this guy over. Has it happened again? It sure as hell looked like it had. What had happened was Taina had just taken the advice really, really seriously. He was doing his very best job not to let us know what the result was. And he was just doing it a bit too well. So that night, after the verdict came through, he was exonerated. An incredible night. His daughter wanted him, it was about midnight, and his daughter wanted to get him home, and Taina was sitting there having the last of a beer, and he said to my girlfriend, he said this thing, when I was in that place, when I was in prison, I only had half a heart. Chanel only had half a heart. Now we have a whole heart, and nothing's going to change that. So that, when my girlfriend told me about what Taina had told him, that was one moment that made sense of why my journey had taken me to that point. The second moment I want to talk about is last year, a day in June 2021. Between our lockdowns, as Chloe said, my family and I made a film together, and Jane and I, my partner, we're two creatives, and for better or worse, we've raised 3 artist kids. Matariki is a poet and a writer and a director. She's my youngest. Mahina, my middle girl, is a painter and a costume designer. Tihima, my boy, is a composer. So last year we made this film called Te Kohu in the Mist. It's a story about a woman who, I don't know if you've seen it, the series is really cool, a whole lot of different spooky stories from different cultures within New Zealand. So it's about a young woman, an 18-year-old woman, who discovers she is patuparehi, and her family have to find the courage to let her go and join the tribe of the mist. Really, what it's about is us as parents actually having the courage to unshackle our kids from our protective / possessive hearts and let them go free. And so the second moment for me was this one day on set where the 5 of us, my little whānau making a film together, were gathered in front of, on set, I don't know who's been on set, but you have these little monitors, so it's another story about looking at a screen. You have these little monitors where you watch what's coming through the camera. And so we were all gathered, doing our job, watching what was coming through the camera, watching our beautiful actors doing their beautiful work. And I looked and I saw the reflection of my whānau in the screen. You know, these 3 extraordinary young people, each of them passionate about creativity, passionate about social justice, passionate about fighting the right fights, couldn't give a shit about making money. Those 2 moments for me are the equivalent of the tornado touching down in that park in Seoul. I could never have planned a life where I would be in a backyard, a bit drunk, honging a man who had become a friend and part of my whānau, who'd just been declared innocent after 21 years in prison. I could never have planned a life where I could be standing in front of a monitor, tears in my eyes, creating something beautiful with the beautiful people I'd helped create. There's no map that got me to those 2 places. That wasn't any part of my plan. All I wanted to do was write. Which brings me back to, why be a writer? And I don't know that I've got any answers to that question, but what I know is, if it's about making a gazillion bucks, I think that's probably the wrong answer, because there's taika and there's witi, and then there's the rest of us who do what we do with love and commitment and passion, and on good weeks we get to pay the power bill. I'm guessing that probably you're right because you got to. You're right because you love how words connect, how you make a newly connected set of words into a sentence that no one has created before, and it's beautiful and it moves you, and if it moves you, then it's probably going to move other people. I think you're right because you have stuff burning inside your heart that has to get out. Social justice and railing against racism or sexism or genderism or ageism or poverty or living a life spent without love or whatever it is. You're right because you've got a truth that only you can tell and that might just change things for others when you tell it. Mostly I think that you write because the act of writing is a joyous thing, and to me that's the biggest why of all. If you don't love spending 3 hours. In lockdown, at the start of the first lockdown, I spent a lot of time thinking. I changed my email signature to "This too shall pass," and I thought a lot about that sentence. And I think it's one of the most extraordinary and beautiful sentences in the world, and a perfectly written sentence. This comma, too comma, shall pass. If you think about what happens if you move those commas around, if you put into this too comma shall pass, it becomes like the sentence about driving down the motorway and having boy racers going past. This too shall pass. This too shall. And if you move the comma again to this too shall comma pass, it's like Donald Trump reading off a autoprompter really, really badly. It makes no sense, right? But you get the commas in the right place. This comma, too comma, shall pass. And it becomes this gift, this underlying philosophy of acceptance and trust that the universe will unscrew the things that have been screwed. And you just have to wait and trust. So I think if you're not somebody who can spend 3 hours figuring out where the commas go and this too shall pass and really enjoy it, if for you writing's like dragging your fingernails down the blackboard, then maybe it's not what you should do. Maybe the joy of writing is the real reason to do writing. So I guess, I don't know if that's any answer, but I think you can't tell a writer not to write any more than you can tell a butterfly not to flap its wings. Where that rush of disturbed air from the little butterfly sitting on a kawakawa bush outside the dairy in Pakimaero goes to, where it will eventually take us as writers when we make that first step into the mist. These things are unknowable and unpredictable. It's all hidden in the forest. You can't know where you're going. And I don't think it matters a bean. Because a butterfly's got to flap its wings and a writer's got to write. And I think we just be comfortable in doing the thing that we love and letting the rest be in the hands of the gods and the winds of chaos. There's my little rant. I didn't know I was going to do a reading tonight. But this is unbelievably exciting for me because my book's not out yet. I haven't seen it yet. And McLeod's have got a copy. And Chloe had the copy to read. So this is the first time tonight that I'm actually able to read from my book. Which is kind of unbelievably exciting. I just want to say that I'm now even more daunted because these two did something that I'll never be able to do, which is to write in the past passive. Tell me if I've got that right, the pluperfect. Like they're writing in the past tense from their readings. You don't even know you did it because you're real writers, right? But I can only write in the present tense. I've tried. So this will be in the present tense. This is the first time I've read from the book, and it's also the first time I've had to think about, this is a crime thriller, so I shouldn't give you spoilers. However, I want to give you enough knowledge to make some sense of what I'm going to read to you. So this is a story about a detective, Hannah Westerman, an extraordinary senior Maori detective in the Auckland CIB, and she she comes to figure out that a series of crimes, a series of murders that haven't previously been connected, she makes the breakthrough that they are connected, and that all of the victims are descendants 8 generations later of a group of people who committed an atrocity during the New Zealand land wars. So that's a bit of a spoiler alert, but it's not a complete spoiler alert. And the passage that I'm going to read you is, you're going to meet the group of people whose descendants are going to die. So, chapter 1. A smudge on the page of history. 5th of October, 1863. His hands move quickly as he polishes the sheet of silver-plated copper to a perfect mirror finish. He is well practiced at this. On a good day, say on a day when he's been engaged to create portraits of a number of members of a wealthy London merchant family, he could easily craft 30 daguerreotypes, perhaps more. In this God-forsaken place on the other side of the world, though, it's far more difficult. Engaged by the Queen's Army to make permanent records of the colonial campaign, he finds himself again and again practicing his art in the field where he has no permanent studio, no light-safe room where he can prepare the materials. It is a challenge, to say the least, but he prides himself on his professionalism. Under cover of a black cloth, the daguerreotypist places the highly polished plate in a sensitizing box containing iodine crystals. He waits patiently for the fumes to react with the silver. Others there are not so patient. "We haven't got all day for this shit," says the captain of the troop. "Hurry up, man." The captain is quite drunk and has been so for hours, ever since his men successfully apprehended the captive. If truth be told, he is inebriated far more often than he is sober, a fact his men know well, attested to by the ongoing lack of rum in their evening rations. And while none would dare make a complaint about the situation, the captain's appetite for the bottle has made him no friends amongst his men. Under the black cloth, the daguerreotypist quietly counts the seconds for the chemical reaction to take hold sufficiently. 25 elderflower, 26 elderflower. "What are you up to under that damn sheet?" the captain demands, impatient to get back to his tent. His bottle is only half finished, and there's little left of the day. In the darkness under the sheet, the daguerreotypist sighs. 35 elderflower, 36 elderflower. For a while, he entertained grander plans for his life. He once had dreams of studying at the Royal Academy schools, imagining a life as a painter who might reinvigorate and modernise the Flemish style for an adoring British art world. But as the son of a long line of blacksmiths, there was scant hope of either being accepted into the Academy schools or being able to afford the extraordinary tuition fees. Faced with the horror of carrying on the family tradition of horseshoes and iron gates, he settled instead on this new art form, preserving frozen images of life not in oil or watercolour, but in copper and mercury and silver. A way for him to make a shilling while using his considerable skills in the play of light on the landscape. It's not painting, but it will do. 45 elderflower. He emerges from the black cloth, about fucking time, says the captain. The daguerreotypist goes amongst the soldiers, carefully moving and repositioning each of them to most advantageously address the stark New Zealand light as it falls through the branches of the towering tree they stand beneath. This is modern-day alchemy, he enthuses, aware that for those unfamiliar with this new technology, the process of creating a daguerreotype can be disarming. It's a little piece of magic. Your images are captured for all time. This moment will remain long after your bones are dust. Get a move on, slurs the captain, I need a shit. Rum does that to a man's bowels, one of the soldiers says, being sure it is not loud enough for the captain to hear. The daguerreotypist returns to his box apparatus, irritated by the captain's drunken disregard for his art. This is called the lens, he explains, indicating the small protrusion that emerges from the middle of the wooden box. When I remove the cap, you must stay perfectly still, perfectly still. The slightest movement, and you'll be but a smudge on the page of history. Apart from the captain's rum breath and flushed face, the soldiers have approached this process with gravity, polishing their uniform buttons, cleaning their tall dress boots to a shine. How are we meant to look, one of them asks. Do we smile? Was Christ smiling in the Last Supper, snaps the daguerreotypist. He was about to have bloody great nails hammered through his hands, the young soldier points out. No wonder he wasn't bloody smiling. Ignoring the laughter, the daguerreotypist perseveres. Did Michelangelo carve a fool's grin into David's face? Smiling makes a man an idiot, he insists. Smiling is for simpletons. Don't smile. He positions himself by the lens. Ready, he warns. Quite still, please, and hold. He removes the cap. Instantly, the exposed image ricochets between a series of mirrors within the body of the wooden box, the light finally falling upside down against the polished silver plate. The photochemical reaction begins to capture the moment. 6 members of the troop, the inebriated captain and his 5 men, are gathered under a towering puriri tree on the crest of a volcanic cone overlooking Auckland Harbour. As the reaction develops, it is plain that, despite not attending the Royal Academy schools, the daguerreotypist has an instinctive grasp of the rule of thirds. The image has a sense of proportion that is almost classical. Below the tree, the 6 British soldiers face the lens in an aesthetically pleasing curving semicircle. Suspended above them, a few yards over their heads, secured to one of the lower branches of the great tree by a length of 12-strand British Army rope noosed tightly around his throat, a 7th person forms the apex of this carefully considered composition. The dead man is naked, the captive stripped and humiliated before he was executed, retribution for having evaded the pursuing troop for quite an embarrassingly long period. As well as the rope around his neck, his hands are tied in front of his torso, his feet bound at his ankles. The man is Mauri, and the tamoko tattooed on his face and body show the markings of a high-born leader. He is silver-haired, in his 50s, and the swirls and lines gouged deep into his skin tell a story of his lineage, the status, the knowledge he carries, the whakapapa passed down to him across generations. A rangatira, a chief of great stature. How much longer, the captain slurs. Do not speak, the daguerreotypist barks. You will be a smudge on the page of history. After the necessary 60 seconds, the cap goes back on the lens. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Michael. That was awesome. For everybody to hear that for the first time, it's very exciting. And how cool that McLeod's had it so that you could. I thought about a few things while you were having your kōrero. We've talked a lot about the social justice, right back from Teina Pora, but those threads are still going through your puka puka now, and that's what I really enjoyed about it, was that you've got this way of weaving the words to make us always look good, even when we're not doing good things, which is a really special art. So, ngā mihi ki a koe. We should all grab, because we're going to have a kōrero now, and we're going to have some pātai. I'll start us off, and then there'll be a circulating mic, and whānau, you can ask questions too. You're asking me how to turn that on, eh? I'm not sure.
Does yours have a number? Like, does it have anything on it? Just press.
What's also really cool about listening to the writers is read their stories, as you can imagine them in audiobooks. Hey whānau, my husband would want me to say that because he can't see, and it's, for some of our whānau, that's how they access books. So I'm just putting a plug in for audiobooks. We're going to start with an easy pātai, I think, just to break the ice. So if you could be, which Māori atua would you be?
I think it comes as no surprise to anyone that I would be Hinenui Te Pō.
And also, no surprise, God of the Wind, but I can't remember the atuas.
Tāwhiri Mātea. Tēnā koe.
Hinenui I Te Repo at the moment, but just because she's the swamp maiden, and so I've been immersed in this swamp stuff, and so that would be for me now. For now.
Tēnā koe. When you guys are weaving our Māori concepts or kupu or pūrākau and our tupuna in some stories into your mahi, are there any extra steps that you have to take?
So I don't have the reo, and I was Aotearoa, but I was brought up outside the region. So I'm very aware of my a sense that I guess in many ways the language and tikanga have skipped a generation with me. My children are all fluent and kind of extraordinary. So for me, it's super important to have the right knowledge and support around me for a whole lot of reasons. So with everything that I'm doing, I always have somebody, and it's normally the same person, Namaru Rarino, who becomes sort of the paumatua of my work, whether it's film or television, or he's the paumatua for this. He's a real wealth of knowledge and language, and also with this book, Tim Worrell, who is Rotorua-based extraordinary guy who was also like a cultural advisor, and I never feel safe not going out there without those things, really. Just I know the things that I want to say. I just want to know that I'm saying them right. Yeah.
Well, that's loud. It shows in your puka puka. So, that you've done that mahi. So, tēnā koe. Beki?
Yeah, I would just sort of bouncing off that. Community is one of the things that we need most as Māori writers, which is why something like this is so special, because that's where a lot of our safety in ensuring we're doing the right things is coming from. But like I said before in my earlier talk, this is a process of learning, and so some of the knowledge of what we need to make sure we're doing the right thing and keeping ourselves safe and doing the right thing by our people and our for our whakapapa and our tipuna, our mokopuna is within community. And so I think for me, I have Renee as a big reader of, like, I think that Mary sent off a first draft of the next one for Renee, and she'll read that. But I have other wahine Māori that will read for me, and that's important. And yeah, we keep learning.
Tēnā koe.
Yeah, I agree. Community is so important. And I never felt like I was. I mean, I'm really pale, obviously. So for a long time, I didn't feel Māori enough to claim that as, you know, say I'm a Māori writer. Until I actually getting into Te Papa Tupu was like, I can tick that box now. I'm Māori enough, and I can claim that name, and that's cool. And getting to know a bunch of other writers and having the support of my mentor, Whiti Hiriaka, and just being involved in that community. And back home, I've got Emma and Steph, we have our own little group, Māori Wahine, who catch up for coffee and cake and talk writing. And it's having those touchstones just to go back to. I think there's always a fear of, for me, doing my culture wrong, because I wasn't raised on a marae. I wasn't raised on my iwi are from down south, and I was born in Taranaki. I remember my mother saying that she only learned she was Māori like 8 years before I was born. It took my granddad a long time to kind of admit that he was, because he knew that he could do better business as a white guy. So he didn't claim that. So for me, kind of learning more about my culture has been a huge thing, and also learning that so much of what I do and put naturally into my stories is part of Te Ao Māori without me even thinking about it, because it kind of it's part of your life, so it's part of everything that you do, and it's really beautiful. So even if other people can't, like from other cultures, might not necessarily pick up on it, Māori people do, and that's awesome.
Tēnā koe. I just want to take a moment and mihi to the vulnerabilities that have been here tonight, because I think that that's really, really special. And, what an honour for you guys to share so much of yourselves with us as an audience. If you're online and you have questions, you can put them in the chat boxes on the YouTube and all of those things, because you guys matter too, and I've been told to keep coming back to you fellas out there, so do that. This one might be a tricky one, but it might not be. Some people believe that Māori writers have the responsibility not to reinforce negative stereotypes about Māori. And some Māori authors have described having thought about that during their writing process. How have each of you found that, if you've found it at all, in your own mahi, and is it something that you've thought about? Is it a hard one?
All questions are hard.
Ka pai, Beki.
I was talking with a writing friend, Tina Makariti. She was one of the first readers of what became Owe. So when she read it, it was just a very rough, it was a first draft. Since then, we've had more kōrero through email, not a lot, but recently we did speak again, and we were talking about I did get a little bit of cop a bit of flack for just winning the crime prize, because a few people were like, it's not a crime book, which is in many ways true, but she said that I feel a little bit now I may be doing the wrong thing, is now using Tina's words that she's actually provided to me as a comfort. So I don't know whether I should go too far in this, but what So I'll just skip a little bit of it. A non-Māori writer writing a full spectrum of good, bad, ugly, evil, beautiful, love, hate, doesn't have to question themselves.
Tēnā koe.
Yeah, they can have that full spectrum, and the reason we struggle with it is because racism likes to get in the way of us just doing our mahi. And if we have more, we'll get more stories, we'll have more stories, and we have a full catalogue of what it means to be Māori, and that can include everything, just like it does for other people. Yeah, that's...
It's such a good answer, because so this is not, it's not really a thing that comes up in my writing, because I'm not writing explicitly Māori stories, if that makes sense. I have some Māori characters, and obviously it's infused with my own culture. So for me, it's almost the opposite of, like, sometimes I feel like I should be writing more Māori, you know, like, because that's not my focus. I like magic and curses and ghosts, and I want to write about those things because that's the stuff I love. So yeah, it's an interesting. But like you said, we need the whole spectrum. We need all of the books. We need all the diversity within our culture and others. It's important.
This is kind of a real raw one for me, Chloe, but it's a really good question, so I really want to answer it. So I came out of my experience with Taina. I'd met so many extraordinary people, like so many extraordinary people who had patches on their back, and Taina being one of them. I went to the tangi of Roy Dunn, who is an extraordinary man who, when he became leader of Mongrel Mob Notorious in South Auckland, he told his gang, we're not going to do it the way we used to do it. There is going to be no meth in this gang. The meth is killing our young, beautiful men and women, and it's no more. And I came out of that wanting to tell those stories, with all the problems that we know we're going to get telling those stories. And so one of the next things that I did was Vegas, and you know, I am so proud of that show, because for me it was, kia ora, thank you. For me it was the creation story of Roy Dunn. It was a young man who in another time would have been a leader of the battalion, would have been a member of parliament. His circumstances took him to a place where he had a patch on his back, and he was going to do, ultimately he was going to do better. You know, drama is about transformation and about people discovering their destinies, and that was the story that I wanted to tell, and I still absolutely stand by that, and a whole bunch of stuff that Vegas, you know, we brought $6 million into this community that had been, tourism was ravished by COVID, and 24 rangatahi were trained, spent 14 weeks working on our show and entered the film industry, and but you know, the headline was another Māori gang story. So it's, you know, I mean, I think it's just sometimes you've got to have a hide like a rhinoceros and tell the stories you believe in.
Tēnā koutou. And it's about who's holding the pen, eh? And as you're saying, we're holding the pen with those stories. Who has a pātai out there? Who has a question? Ka pai.
I was tapped on the shoulder, but tēnā koutou, ko Mercia Yates, tōku ingoa. And I would actually just like to pick up on your word that you used, Chloe, when you described the vulnerabilities. And my question was going to be about vulnerabilities, but each of them just shared a part of their vulnerability. But I just want to acknowledge you, Michael, for being brave to bring Vegas to Rotorua at a time when we were most vulnerable. we had also come out as a community, and you know the film lens that we have here in Rotorua. It's amazing. It is going to transform our global space of Indigenous film because we've got the power right here of what the film industry can be like. But your writings created a space and a place for us to actually see ourselves in a different world, in a world without gangs and patches. The unfortunate thing is we only got the first series through. So ehara I te pātai, engari kei te hiahia au, a nākau nei, ki te mihi atu ki a koe. Thank you for bringing that story home. I think each and every one of us here tonight can understand and relate the power of a patch on another person's back. But that does not mean to say that that is going to always be the way of that individual person. So thank you for bringing that story home. Thank you for allowing our rangatahi who are still involved in the film industry to be a part of the film industry and to continue with pride with which you were able to bring through your writings back home. So nei rā te mihi kauatu ki a koutou, not a question, but just an acknowledgement. So thank you. I got tapped on the shoulder.
Tēnā koe. He pātai anō?
Kia ora, is this Mark? Yeah, sweet. My name's Anthony. Yeah, me and my friend Sophie, we've come down today from Auckland, and thank you for your time tonight. Yeah, as you know, two young aspiring Māori writers, it's really inspirational to see three who have made it, three who have got their names on book covers over there. So yeah, thank you for your time. I was just wondering. So I'm writing. I started writing a few years ago. In lockdown, and it's really been like a saving grace, a fiction writing, you know, a place to escape. But with that escape, because obviously it's made up, I was just wondering, where do you draw the line between being authentic and incorporating aspects of you and your culture and your fears and your goals into the characters and into the story, and where do you draw the line with like that made up sort of aspect of fiction? Because yeah, sometimes it's a bit tricky for me to see where I draw the line between me and the character, if that makes sense. So I was just wondering if you got any advice on that in general.
That's a big one.
Yeah, pātai nui. No, it's a good question. Do you have a thought already?
I could,
Cool.
I can have a thought.
Yeah.
I think that is a really hard one. That's a huge question. I would say that every character I write has some of me in it. I think where I draw the line is that I pull from life and things that have happened or people I know, but I don't transplant them, if that makes sense. Like no one from my life is in my books, although sometimes there'll be a line and Mum will go, "Oh, is that so and so?" And I'll be like, "Well, that is something they would say, and it is inspired by that person, but that character is not that person." But yeah, so it is a really hard one because you wanna bring authenticity, and I like to get quite vulnerable in my writing. Like I'm quite happy to do that in real life too, because I think we all need more of that in some ways. You know, just to be real with each other. Yeah, so I think for me it's about using inspiration, but not picking a person up from life and putting them in my book, unless they specifically ask me to. And sometimes people will do that, but I haven't yet.
I feel like you're so ethical. That's fabulous. I'm a vampire, and I just warn everybody, like, you know, talk to me and it's going to end up in something that I do. My daughter's in this. She's quite clear. Even her tattoo, it's so obvious that she's. My sister's in this. I think if you're having trouble clarifying between who the character is and who you are, you're doing it right. Because I think that's where it comes from. You've got to be telling stories that you actually are living and know. And yeah.
I'm so glad that you went next, because I was like, oh, Cassie's doing a real good job.
I'm writing magical stuff, so it's much easier to make.
True.
Like I'm not. Yeah.
Because I think drawing on something that's true is like a seed that can help your imagination bloom in a way. Like sometimes you'll take something that's really happened or a real person, and then once they're on the page, they do transform on their own, so they kind of get their protection through you continuing to work on your fiction. But I really think sometimes it's so important to use something real as a seed. And like my husband will he's told me some stories and then I'm like, oof, that's got to go in my next book. But that's fine, but it morphs, it changes, and then you know you're doing, if it feels good, then it's going. And that transformation of taking something that's real and creating something new out of it is part of the beautiful part of doing art. So keep going hard.
Yeah, I would like to say I do use a lot of things. People are not what I transplant. Other things are fair game.
Thank you. Any more questions out there? Oh, down the back.
Kia ora. Just for Michael, I used to work with your sister Nikki at Boys High, and she said to me one night, "Oh, you should come to my brother's book launch." And I thought, "Oh, I know somebody who's got a brother that writes books. That's pretty cool." And so I came along. I think it was down at Tama, and so that was your Dark Places, the book on Teina Pora. And so I bought the book that night, and it's a really brilliant book. My question is, like, how's Teina? Like, do you keep up with him, and how's his whānau?
He's good. He's not in the place that he was. He's with his daughter and his grandson. Teina has a brain injury. He has FASD. His mother was an alcoholic and drank while she was hapu, and his FASD explains a lot about why he made a false confession, or why he didn't see what was happening with the police encouraging him to make a false confession. Because with the FASD, one of the things is that you don't understand cause and effects and consequences of your actions. What he saw was a $20,000 reward. What he didn't see was confessing to a crime is going to end up in prison. So he is somebody, and FASD and those symptoms being the inability to kind of like understand long-term effects of your decisions, you can't undo that. You can't train that out of a person. You can't therapize that, whatever the word is. So he is always going to, have difficulties in his life, and he will, thank goodness, Teina has a trust. So, he was compensated $3.5 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but 21 years. But thank goodness he has a trust, because since he got that $3.5 million, everyone wants to be his best friend. Everyone wants to. Teina is continuously going to his trust saying, "Look, just give me my money," because his best friends want to use his money. So he has people looking after him, which is fantastic. He's always going to be faced with massive challenges, but at heart he's this extraordinary person with a beautiful heart and who speaks poetry, like those words that he said on the night about half a heart. And he comes out with this stuff all the time. He's a person with a good heart, and that will always put him in good stead. But the damage in his brain will always make him at risk of hurting himself or being hurt by others.
Kia ora. My question is particularly for Michael Bennett. Originally I had a different question, but since you brought up Vegas, why not? I come from Rotorua, I whakapapa here. This place has nourished me and raised me, and I feel very strongly about it. Now, when Vegas came out, as you're aware, there was quite a divide. And the question that I couldn't get past was that book that originated this was based on a book of profiling he did on suspicious clientele that came into the gambling houses. That is racist. Compiling a list of people that you think are suspicious based on nothing other than how they look is racist. So my question is how, when there's so many productions, especially in Rotorua, like Hairako, which I worked on, and all these other things, how did you justify using racist source material to tell a story about Maori?
Thank you, Wha. I respect your question. This is, I'm not sure how you're going to receive this, but I read the book once and I took 5 events out of that book. Literally took 5 events out of that book and utterly recreated all of the characters. Created a whole new, with the support of many of the people that you know, with Lara, with Tim, with Piripi, we created a whole new world that they lived in, a world that wasn't Rotorua. I know it's called Vegas, and I will always regret the fact that we didn't call it something else. It was a mythological place that wasn't this place, that was, I wanted to bring a production here. I wanted to make Rotorua stand up on the screen as a place to bring a film, to shoot a film, because this place, 3 hours from Auckland, should have its own studios. It should be a place where people are shooting continuously. I wanted to get that on the screen. And we created a new mythological world and a new group of people that had literally 5 events taken from that book. I think we spoke with a completely, utterly different voice to the voice that you fear that we were channeling. I wasn't channeling, and I don't think any of those around me were channeling. That's the only answer I can give.
I have a question. And it's to do with a 13-year-old that's in the room. What are you going to say to Rangiatea? She's a 13-year-old Māori girl, matataui te reo, lives here in Rotorua and writes fiction in her spare time. What are you going to say to her? Any of you, all of you?
Just keep writing, I guess. I don't know, like it's a... I was definitely a 13-year-old girl writing. I had a... pretty sure back then we had, you know those really old computers with the black screen and the green text? I don't even know what they were called, but that's what I wrote my first novel on that wasn't in a book, in a paper book. So I would, for a 13-year-old, I would just say, write what you love to write. Don't let anyone tell you that it's the right or the wrong thing to write, because writing the things that you love and that call to you will give you the most joy. And if you're going to write, you should find your joy in it. So that would be my advice.
Read lots as well, like reading's so important, but just go hard with writing and get excited about the stories that you want to tell and go out in the world and find those stories. And I don't want to sound like a boring old person, but maybe like limit your screen time a little bit.
Tēnā koe.
I agree, but I also don't agree, because both of your writing is so visual. And like, you know, Alfred Hitchcock said something like, when he reads a book, he doesn't read words. It's just a series of images to him. And you know, this amazing period where we're bombarded by images, it doesn't mean words don't have to exist as well. They can become, and I think both of you,
Yeah, story is on screen as well. I just meant more that like
Games.
that like attention.
Amazing. Some games are phenomenal. Some games have the most amazing stories. So yeah, not like phone games, but bigger games. Yeah. I haven't had much time to game lately, but my favourites have been like Horizon Zero Dawn. I love that game. That was gorgeous. That was on the PlayStation 4, but it's on the PC now, I think. What is it? There's something human. I can't remember the names of it. And my favourite is actually, I really like the Uncharted series on PlayStation. Nathan Drake for life.
Ka pai. So we're not limiting our kids from games or screen time or anything else fun, okay? Stories everywhere. It's cool.
Kia ora. So we have some viewers who are watching this live, and I'm just going to read a comment and a pātai. So first, Kaituhi has mentioned, wow, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, Beki, Cassie, my heart, and Michael, what talent and humbleness, rawe. And then we have Maxine. Kia ora, Maxine. So Maxine's pātai is, Beki, Cassie, and Michael, are your favorite authors in the same genre as what you currently write in, and who are they?
I don't have a microphone.
I mean, I love the genre that I write in, and one of my favourite authors is Truman Capote, who wrote In Cold Blood, which has been so influential on me. And if you haven't read it, then read it. It's an extraordinary book, a true crime book. But my favourite author is a woman called Miranda July, who's this wacky American artist who couldn't be more different to my genre. She's just this stream of consciousness, beautiful storyteller. I think she is my favourite author because I could never write anything like her, and I admire her so much. But she has, like, I mean, the ultimate test for me is that, you know, is there at heart, no matter what the genre is or what the storytelling is or the wackiness or whatever, you know, ultimately is it about is it humanistic? Is it, you know, is there true humanity and love of humanity in the book, and that can be in any genre, I think.
I have a new favourite author every single week, I think. And I read, I don't just read within, I've only written one book, so I don't have a right to call myself any particular type of writer. But there's a writer, which is just one that sprung to mind right now, which is Anne MacDonald. She wrote, I think, the way the crow flies, something the crow flies, and Fall at Your Knees. And what I love about her writing is that her children in her books, they're very adult themed books, but the children are extremely well within these adult worlds. They're very they're brought to life, and they're complicated and fascinating and interesting. So she's just one that's sprung to mind right now. But yeah, I have a new favourite every week.
There's so many amazing books and authors, and access to books has never been easier. So I read a lot. I think I'm up to 110 books this year. Yeah, I read audiobooks, and so I can listen to them when I wash the dishes, or when I hang the washing out, or when I vacuum, and when I drive, and when I shop at the store. Audiobooks are life. And I love that I can get 2 apps from the library, and oh my goodness, I've got like 8 queued up right now. But I read quite a lot of different genres. I quite like non-fiction, not just to put me to sleep at night, but because there's so many fascinating things to learn about the world. I definitely read in my genre. I love anything speculative. I love science fiction, and I love horror, and I love fantasy, and I love mysteries and thrillers and like cozy mysteries. I've been having a cozy mystery patch. Really, they're just fun, and you know things are going to work out okay. And sometimes you just need to know that things are going to be okay. Oh, and I love a good rom-com. Actually, I read everything.
Same.
Yeah, I'm just
110 books is that's about what I read too.
I kind of it's it's really hard. You can't pin down to one thing. My favourite authors probably I really love Maggie Stiefvater, her Raven Boys. Oh, and what is that? The Scorpio Race is my favourite book. And V.E. Schwab, she's amazing. She writes a lot of different things too. And I really love The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And at the moment I'm binging Annette Marie, I think her name is, and she writes this book about this non-wizard who enters this bar and they're all magical and she's not, but somehow she gets to stick around and do really cool things and save the day, even though she's a human, and that's awesome. She kicks ass. Yeah, so I read everything, and I also am a little bit like that with my writing too. I cannot stick to one thing, which is why I have many pen names.
Can I just say what's in my bag right now, what I brought up with me, is I found a copy of The House of the Talking Cat by Jackie Sturm in a second-hand bookshop in Greymouth, and it's a collection of her short stories. And I'm just like, I'm completely blown away by them. Like one in particular is a story about a woman who's waiting at home for her husband to come home, and that's all that's happening. That's the only thing that's really happening, but there's so much happening within that. The subtext is just incredible. This book is just incredible. It's very slim, and when I found it, I was like, oh my God, when do you ever see The House of the Talking Cat anywhere? So, yeah.
I love it when you find that book. Yes. I had my book like that is House of Leaves by Mark, someone whose name I can never remember, but it's amazing and you should all read it. But I bought it on recommendation of my mentor when I was into Papatupu, and it cost like $60 or something, and I was like, this better be good. It was really good. It was so good that I lent it to my brother, and then it got lost in my brother's house because that's the House of Leaves for you. But then I went to a second-hand book sale with my mother-in-law, and I found a copy for $4. And I was like, well, that one's coming home with me.
Tēnā koutou. I hope that you three don't mind me including you in the Go the Nerds, because that was awesome, and thanks for sharing your stories. Thanks for sharing what you're reading. Thanks for being vulnerable. I'm going to end it there, whānau, because we've come to the end. But matua rangitihi, hara mai.
Paku karakia kia whakakōpani ai tā tātou pō. Nā reira kia whakairihia te kete kōrero kia wāte ai te hurai kia tūruki whakatahai, kia tūruki whakatahai, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you very much.
E te whānau, we're going to have some book signing down there. So if you don't have a book and you want to get one, go and grab one. If you have your book in your bag like I do, then grab that too. Thanks for being an amazing audience. Thank you everybody online. Thanks for leaving your kōrero, and thanks for being there with us. Tēnā koutou.